I've raced close to 30 different Hyrox events, and I'm going to tell you my 8 most important lessons that I've learned so you can skip past all my pain and get better results sooner. My name is Rich Ryan, 1/3 of the coaching team at RMR Training, Elite 15 athlete with a PR of 54:28. This first lesson that I learned came early in my Hyrox career, actually my first race, and this is something that inexperienced racers just don't follow through with almost always. So in my first race, this was in Orlando, Florida in 2021. It was a really humid spring day, and maybe there was only 400 people or so in this venue on this day. It was still early in the United States. I was racing against David Magida, who had already established himself as one of the best athletes in the Hyrox world. So I knew I had my work cut out for me. And right from the jump, I engaged in racing David's race. And this really led to a terrible demise after the sleds. I came out of Burpee Broad Jumps absolutely dead and just had to kind of put it in survival mode and get through that finish line. So the first lesson that I learned early in my Hyrox career is to run your best race, you have to run your race. And running other people's races before you know how to run your own race is only going to lead to poor performance. The second lesson that I've learned has specifically to do with your gear and your footwear. So this race was in Chicago. This was actually my second race ever. And I bought a pair of shoes called the Endorphin Pro 1s. And I thought that they were going to work. This was going to give me the edge that I needed, but I never really tested them out. I got there on race day, put them on, pushed the carpet in the warm-up area, and they weren't going to work. The push and the pull, they just weren't going to work at all. So I had to wear the other shoes that I had worn in training that I wore in my previous race, but it's been about like 5 or 6 weeks since that last race, so they had worn down considerably. And during the race, it cost me time. I was slipping on the push, I was slipping on the pull, the rope was coming out of my hands, and I wasn't getting good traction from the ground. So the second lesson is test your gear in a specific way so that you know that when you show up on race day that it's going to work. This third lesson that I've learned has saved me a ton of time in the long haul. Early in my racing career, I was not quite sure how to go about each individual station and each individual piece of the race. And during these like transition times, I would really kind of take my time. And one specific example was in the North American Championships the following year, I believe this was 2022, I had come up with a strategy to like wear gloves after the sled push into the sled pull, and then I was going to ditch the gloves. Coming into sled pull, I just like didn't have these like wide receiver gloves that I was wearing, and I didn't have them like Velcro down coming into the station. I got to the rope and just like wasted time by strapping on my gloves, where I could have clearly done that out on the course itself, but I just didn't do it. So it took time to like strap on my gloves, and I wasted a lot of time. And then later in that same race, I was messing around with the pedals on the rower, and when it came to the end of the race, I ran really well. It was my best time that I've run by far. I was super prepared. But at the end of the season, where they took times from the Elite 15, they were just going off time at the time, and I probably had wasted 30 seconds in that race just by fiddling around with different pieces of the like my gear and like of the course. So the lesson I learned that day is to act with urgency. Being urgent in your transitions, being urgent and mindful of how you're going to come in and out of stations is going to save you a lot of time. In a sport that is time-based and where you're racing against people and you might not see where they are in the competition, every second matters, so you need to be urgent when racing. This fourth lesson has to do with a mindset shift around training. So in my first couple of races, I thought that I just wasn't going to be good at the push and pull. So my race strategy became, let's just manage this and let's just get around it. And it would come out and I'd be able to survive it and I'd be able to race hard in the back half. But this is kind of a defeatist mindset. And I just didn't attack my weaknesses the way that I should have so that I could just actually get better. Instead of just moving away from it, I should have leaned into it more to make this weakness a strength. So that's lesson number 4. Make your weaknesses strengths in training. This fifth lesson is something that was a big mental barrier, and it's something that I feel I come across often with the athletes that I coach or the people who I come across. After the 2023 season, I believe it was for me, I had the whole season was like fine. I did run a PR only by about a minute. I was outside of the Elite 15, and I had probably 5 races that year that just didn't go the way that I thought they should go. And the totality of the season just was a bit of a disappointment. And so coming into the next season, I was just kind of bummed out. Like, I didn't think that I was as good as I thought I could be at this, and that maybe I had reached part of my potential. But early into that next season, I surpassed anything that I'd done previously, and I was able to compete really well in one of the majors in Hyrox. And it made all those past races just go away. And I realized that I'm not defined by the results of these races, and one good race can turn everything around. So that's the 5th lesson that I hold true to myself, that my results are not me, and that one good race is the best way to remedy any previous poor races. The 6th lesson has to do with the mental grind of the race itself. In Washington, D.C. in 2024, it was a major to qualify into the World Championships. And I had a really bad race the race before, and I just wasn't sure how it was going to go. But I decided I was just going to put myself in it. I trained really hard in the couple weeks before to really ramp up my intensity. And into that race, I had a good sled push, I had a good sled pull, I had great burpee broad jumps, and then I got on the row, and I was like dying. I was almost upset that I was in 3rd place. I was in World Championship qualifying position, and I wanted to quit because it was just so hard. I didn't think I could do it. And every single run, I'd come out there and I would stay fairly consistent, and I would just try to stay within myself. And then every time I get to a station, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to complete it, like at all. And every single time I was, because I had trained hard and because I was willing to mentally buckle down and accept the discomfort that was going to be present was temporary, and that I could get through this temporary discomfort if I just chose to do so. So the 6th lesson here is that this race is really hard. And in order to run your best race, you need to brace for how hard this race is going to be, because you're more capable than you think you are when it comes to tolerating this discomfort. So prepare yourself for it, and on that race day, do not give into it. This next lesson is one that is hard to swallow, but is just the reality of the situation for Hyrox and for sports in general. So I took the risk to go to an international race to get a time to help myself qualify for the standard for the majors. There were no races here in the United States early enough for me to qualify for the first major, which was in Chicago. So I flew to Madrid, and I was going to go after a time. During that race, there's no other way around it. I experienced something that I never experienced before. I think I had a bad sled lane, and I saw some footage previous of it, and ran it back and forth, and just like, the way I was pushing it, the way the sled was moving was something I never experienced before, is something I haven't experienced since. And it was just like old carpet and maybe an old sled, and I got demolished. And in that moment, I just thought I was not great at the sleds. I did come back in training, I buckled down, I got better at them. But in retrospect, I just kind of caught a bad break. I just got a bad lane. And that's going to happen to you at some point. You are going to have something happen to you in a race that was out of your control, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you just have to roll with it. And that's sports. And Hyrox is not different. Whether it is, if it's a sled lane, if it's a supercredited course, if it's just like a bad rock zone, if like you fall down, if you get sick, there's just things that are going to happen that are going to be bad breaks for you as an athlete, and it's going to be negative for your results. But knowing this just makes it easy to accept. So the 7th lesson that I've learned over the course of my time in Hyrox is that bad breaks happen, and not everything is in your control. So this final lesson that I've learned took me a long time to wrap my head around. And once I did understand this concept, my results absolutely skyrocketed. So after the 2024 season at World Championships didn't go well, leading into the season in 2025, I decided to make a lot of shifts, changing the way that I was approaching things, and figuring out like what I enjoyed doing, and then doing that in training. And then once I really kind of committed to this concept of doing what is enjoyable and what I liked to do, my results skyrocketed. I took almost 4 minutes off my PR from the summertime to the fall. And the lesson that I learned is this is fun. This is supposed to be fun. If we're not having fun doing this, something needs to change. And if you're not having fun doing this, or it's too stressful, or it's too mentally taxing, you're not going to get the best results possible. We're all here to get good results. But if we are taking it too seriously, for me anyway, if I was taking it too seriously, I'm not going to get the results that I wanted. Once it started being fun, once it's about enjoyment, then my results got much, much better. So I recommend that you try to have fun as well. Many other lessons, I will continue to learn lessons. Remember that there is learning in every single race. So taking time to reflect on what you have learned and making sure that you execute going forward so that you don't make those mistakes again, or you can take those positive lessons to keep stacking the wins on top of each other is a great way to continue to make awesome progress in your Hyrox results. So drop me a comment, hit me with a like, share this with a friend who needs to hear this. I'll talk to you soon.